This is where I start looking even more like the bad guy, where I go from bum to evil. I realize that most of you probably don't know like where I come from, and so I wanted to say here, if you enjoy the mystique of like not knowing where your mother comes from and me just kind of popping up on your homepage at some point and you started watching me, if you enjoy that and like not knowing the backstory, then probably don't watch this video, because I'm going to say some things that are going to be unsavory about myself and things that will not paint myself in the best light. And so I guess the most important thing that I wanted to start with is talking about me being canceled, because it is kind of the reason that I do what I do now, and if it didn't happen, I'm not sure if I would still be doing content at all, and I definitely would not be doing reviews. So it's kind of an important thing to talk about, and I don't know where to start. I guess I should start at the beginning because that's a good place to start a story. I moved out of my parents' house when I was 18. I didn't go to college. Me and my parents, as I've discussed several times, have a terrible relationship. Actually, I have a terrible relationship with all of my immediate family members. Regardless of who's at fault for those problems that we have, there are problems. So I moved out of the house when I was 18 and I started living in my car. After doing that a while, I reunited with my parents. They didn't really apologize for anything. We didn't really solve any issues. They just kind of told me that they wanted to help out. And so they started helping out. I started living with them for a little while, and by a little while I mean like a month. It was a very short time because again, they didn't apologize for anything, we didn't resolve anything. So it kind of just picked right back up where we started, which was a terrible place because I left the house anyway. And so we started fighting again, and it got to a point where they kicked me out again. I think it was because they had gotten me a job, a terrible job, at this gas station that was close to the house, and I got fired because the lady that worked there was an alcoholic, and she was constantly saying that I was late or that I didn't show up for shifts that I didn't have and when I wasn't late. And so we got into it one time because I was over at this guy's house that I was seeing, and she said that I was supposed to be at work, but I wasn't scheduled to work, and it was this whole thing. So I just told her, Mama, just take me off the schedule. I'm done with this. And so that became like a whole thing because they had gotten me that job, because it's hard for me to get jobs because I can't pass a background check. So getting me a job in any capacity, even if it's a terrible job, is like supposed to be a huge accomplishment, and I'm supposed to like suck the dick of anyone that does it and not complain about how terrible the job is. And so that was their final straw with me, and they kicked me out. And so I went back to being homeless. However, this time without the car that I was living in. I forget exactly what happened. I think my car got repossessed, but like something had happened while I was living with my parents, and so I didn't have my car anymore, but now was homeless again. And so to avoid being on the streets, I had to start living with the guy from earlier that I was talking about, that I just started talking to. I only knew this guy for like maybe a month at this point, maybe like 3 weeks probably. Had to start living with him, so that was lovely. And I know this is a story about me being canceled, and I promise we will get there. This is all leading up to it. All of this is important, pertinent information to understand how I got canceled. Okay, so I start living with this guy, right? And we're like dating or something. And this is like my first real relationship. And this was maybe 3 years ago now. So I was probably 21 at the time. I think the guy was 23. I'm not going to say his real name, so we could just say he had a really common name, which sucks. Don't date anybody with a really common name, because when you break up, you will have to hear their name every single fucking day for the rest of your life. Anyway, so let's just say his name is John. It wasn't John, but it was a name that was just as common. And so me and John were living together. And remember, at this time, I am unemployed because I can't find a job, because I can't pass a background check. And also, you have to keep in mind that in North Carolina, things are very far from each other. You kind of need a car to be able to live there. So if you don't have one, there's no public transportation. So if you don't have a car, then you're walking. But things are not walkable. So you're just walking very far distances. It does kind of depend on the area that you're in, but the area that I was in was not one of the areas where you could get around without a car. And remember, I didn't have a car at this time, so I couldn't get myself around. So like I was just kind of stuck there because I couldn't pass a background check. So all of the jobs that were immediately available, like the closest jobs to me that I could probably maybe walk to, they were jobs I couldn't get because I couldn't pass a background check. And I guess there's a story time for another day of why I can't pass a background check, but spoiler alert, has something to do with my mother and when I was 17. Anyway, me and this guy are living together. We're in this fake relationship thing, even though we've only known each other for like maybe a month and a half at this point. I'm technically unemployed, except for not really, because what I had started doing was doing content on TikTok. That's where I came came from. If anyone is wondering why I talk so fast, that's why. I was trained to get my shit in 60 seconds. I started doing political stuff. I started finding out about what's happening in Palestine. I started doing like GoFundMe's for people that are in Palestine. Started raising money and doing like crowdfunding and stuff for people that are in Palestine currently. I was doing that whole gig. I was doing that whole like socially conscious, communist, socialist, anti-government, boom, boom, bam, bam, thank you, ma'am, that kind of whole thing. Which, just as a note, I'm still doing all of that. ACAB, hate the police, and America is a terrible country. I'm just not selling that as like content anymore, but that is who I am. I was doing like the historical angle, so I would like do more videos that kind of like explained relevant topics and like the history behind them. So like when the Rafah crossing would get closed in Palestine, I would explain like what the Rafah crossing is and the history of all the times it's been closed before. That was my bread and butter. That's what I was doing. And so even though I wasn't working like a regular job, I was making money from making videos, and I was using that money to save up so I could get a car, so I could either start getting a job that was further away or eventually live in that car. And so me and this guy are living together, and for the most part things are going fine. And then one day he tells me that his lease is going to be up in like 2 months. And so I'm like, oh, okay, because remember, I'm staying with him and I'm saving up for this car. So his lease being up means that that's my deadline to get the money to get this car. And another thing to keep in mind, this is all taking place up until this point that we are in the story. It's been like a month and a half. It has not been that much time. From the time that I have gone from being homeless, living in my car, to living back with my parents, losing my car, being homeless again, and then starting to live with this basically stranger that I've only knew for like 3 weeks, it's been a total of like a month and a half. The guy tells me his lease is going to be up in 2 months, and so I'm like, okay, cool, I've got this deadline. I was okay with that. I was like, okay, cool, thank you for updating me and telling me that I've got like this time limit. Then he asks me if I would like to move in with him at the next apartment that he goes to. And I go, oh, well, that's a lovely offer. Sure, I would love to do that. And so we start looking for apartments. And I let him know before we start like looking, when we're just like talking about it still, I let him know that I have a terrible credit score, so that's going to affect our ability to be able to get an apartment together. And I also realized that this whole story makes me seem like a bum, and that's because I was literally the definition of a bum in all the ways that you could possibly define the word. I was literally homeless with a terrible credit score, living out of my car, and then got the car repoed. I don't know how you could get any lower than that, but anyway, I digress. I tell him this stuff, and I let him know, I disclose that if we try to get an apartment together, it is going to be very hard because of me. And you know what he says? Oh, okay. And so we start looking for apartments. We start touring some apartments. I think we looked at like 2 to 3 spaces. And keep in mind that at this time, I'm thinking, okay, before, when he told me that his lease was going to be up in 2 months, I'm thinking, all right, I've got 2 months to get this money to get this car. But now that he's telling me that we're going to be moving to another space together, that means that I don't necessarily have to adhere to the 60-day time limit because I have more time, because I'm going to have a space to live. So I won't necessarily need to get a car immediately. After we've looked at like 2 to 3 spaces, he then tells me out of the blue, out of nowhere, he goes, hey, I don't think we're going to be able to move together. And he starts going on about all these concerns that he has about me having a low credit score. And notwithstanding the fact that I told him before we started looking about the fact that I had a terrible credit score. And he waited weeks to tell me this, by the way, waited like 3 to 4 weeks. And so we're now halfway through the 2nd month, which now means there's like 2 weeks until the end of the lease when I have to get the money to get the car. And also keep in mind that during this whole fiasco, we're still in a relationship. We're still together. We're still partners. And so what ends up happening is I start freaking out, as I think anybody in my situation would, and I have this platform that I just cultivated, so I decide, ding, 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 let me start using that. So I start asking people online for donations, in addition to the money that I was getting from like making my regular videos. And I'm doing all of this kind of like in a mad dash, because I'm like, okay, I've got like 2 weeks to get all of the money together to get a car, and not like a shitty car either, because if you get a terrible car, then it'll just break down and that'll be more money that you have to spend. And so I didn't want to be in a situation where I bought a problem, but I also didn't want to wait too long, because then I'll be on the street. So it was just a very stressful situation. And when he told me that he didn't want to move together with me anymore because of my credit score, the way that he said it in his tone, it felt like to me he was soft launching a breakup, if that makes sense. To me, it felt like he was giving this kind of really bad news so that he could later give this really, really bad news. Like, it felt like he was gauging my reaction to see like how he should do the next thing, if that makes any sense. And so when he said that to me, I was like, okay, we're not moving in together, and also you're breaking up with me. That's how I interpreted what he was saying. saying. And so when I went online to start asking people for donations, I framed it as like, my landlord is kicking me out. I only have 2 weeks, boop, 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 boop. Like, I tried to put a time limit and a deadline on it. I tried to frame it in a way so that it would feel as urgent as it felt to me. And also, I didn't want to use his name or be like, my partner who I'm still dating is kicking me out and I need money for rent. Like, that just sounds weird. And so one of their friends ends up seeing the post that I made asking for money and like saying that my landlord is kicking them out. And they thought that was weird because they're like, well, aren't they staying with you and aren't y'all dating? And so then that made my partner mad. And so then they came to me and were like, I never said that I was breaking up with you. And they gave me this whole long talk. They woke me up out of my sleep to give me this whole long talk, reassuring me about how they weren't breaking up with me and how that wasn't what they were saying and how like they loved me so much. And it was this whole thing. And I was like, oh, okay, well, it was shocking to me because I was like, that really sounded like what you were doing. But like, if you're telling me that you weren't breaking up with me and you don't want to break up, okay. What ends up happening is for the next following 3 days, they don't talk to me at all. They don't text me. They don't call me. They don't look at me. We are also sleeping in separate rooms at this point because they had a roommate when I had first gotten there that was moving out. And so there was an empty room. And so I had started staying in that room after they told me that they didn't want to move in an apartment together. And I thought they were breaking up with me. I started sleeping in that room. And after they had come into that room, waking me up out of my sleep to be like, no, I don't want to break up with you. I'm in love with you. After that, I was still sleeping in that room. So we just kind of stayed in those 2 rooms and I never saw them for 3 straight days. And then on the 4th day, I got a text from them in the morning time saying something to the effect of like, I just don't think things are going to work out between us and you have like a week to get all your stuff together and get out. So first of all, as you may notice, the timeline has gone from 2 months to 2 weeks to a week for me to conjure up the amount of money that one would need to buy a car that's not going to immediately break down and like get all of my stuff and affairs in order. And so this is where the story like takes a little bit of a left turn. This is where I start looking even more like the bad guy, where I go from bum to evil. This pissed me off. I don't know what to say other than the fact that I just felt betrayed. I had been broken up with, number one, for the first time in my life at the ripe old age of like 21, 22, which it just never feels great. Certainly doesn't feel great to happen at the worst time in your life already. So I was being broken up with, which made me feel a certain type of way. I had been broken up with over text when the person that was breaking up with me was across the hall. And then they had just given me a serious, stern talking to where they assured me that they loved me and that they didn't want to break up, and then waited 3 days and then said, you know what, never mind. And so I was just feeling a certain type of way. And so what I did, I went over to across the hall and I went to their room and I knocked on the door. I banged on the door. And I said, I want to talk. And I tried to talk to them and I don't remember what was said. I probably said something rude. They probably said something rude. I don't remember what was said, but I remember that I tried to talk to them and it did not go well. So I went back to the room that I was in, which was the room of the roommate that had just moved out, and I trashed it. I tore it apart. There was a piano in there that belonged to the ex, and I did certain things to the piano. I'll just say that there was some very light property damage. Also, just a little bit of a tidbit, if anyone cares to do the research, I believe the videos are still up. I will not insert them here or be looking them up myself because I cannot stand to look at them because it is quite traumatic. But if you go to TikTok and just put in "your mother evicted," I believe the videos are still there. There will be videos of exactly what I did to that room. And you might be thinking, wow, well, that's kind of a good reason to get canceled. Not even what I got canceled for. Exactly. And so after I did that, I just kind of like took a moment as a breather in the room after trashing it to kind of collect my thoughts. And what I could hear is that they were still friends with the roommate that had moved out. They had called the roommate over. And so my ex, their roommate, and the ex-roommate were in the living room and they were talking about me, which I feel like, you know, I was trashing a room. So like, what else are you going to talk about? They were saying things. I cannot remember exactly what was said, but they were saying things that were so unfair, just saying stuff about like general slurs and like derogatory language about homeless people generally, which I was just like, what? Like, I understand at the time I was not, you know, really representing the homeless population great at the time. Like, I get that. I don't feel that everything that went wrong in the situation was completely my fault. with that said, I'm about to tell you about something that I did that was completely my fault and was terrible. So after I trashed the room and after the roommates left, I had called an Uber so I could go to just go somewhere else, to go to a hotel. And the Uber had come, so I got my stuff together and I left out. My ex was in the living room, so I could see them while I was walking toward the front door. I don't remember exactly how this started or what was said. I might have said something inflammatory toward them, and then they said something like, just get the hell out. And then I think there was a glass, and I knocked it over. There was a point in time where I would think back on the things that I did, and I'd be like, I really did that. Like, I served him up. And I think about it now, and I'm just like, I just get embarrassed. I just feel childish. I'm just like, ew, that just seems so like, I could have just not done that. And it didn't do anything for me, especially when I talk about what happened next. So after I did that, I got in the car. I had went to the messages between me and my ex, and before I blocked their number, I told them to kill themselves. I don't remember what was said before that or what the conversation was before that, but I just said kill yourself, and then I blocked them on everything. So I'm in this Uber, I've got all my stuff, I am at this hotel that I'm at, and I had made a friend online that lived in Chicago, which is where I'm at now. And I asked them, I was like, hey, I really don't have any options. I don't have a car. I don't have any friends in North Carolina that I can stay with. You're really my only option at this point. Can I stay with you? And they said yes. So my plan at this point was to use the money that I was going to use to buy a car and buy a plane ticket so I could go to Chicago. So that's what I was doing. I'd bought my plane ticket. I had my stuff. I was in this hotel. I knew when I was going to go. And so I was just like sitting in the hotel, like kind of just like waiting for the next thing so I could start my new life in Chicago. I go back onto TikTok. I don't remember why. And I just have a lot of messages. And I had a platform of a certain size, but I was not anywhere near like very popular or like, I had maybe I think like 25,000 followers, something like that. So it was nothing crazy. I was not used to like my message inbox being flooded with messages from strangers. That was not something that was happening to me every day. But I opened TikTok this time while I was in the hotel, and I just had messages from everybody, all of my mutuals, people I didn't know, just message after message after message, which again, never happens to me. And again, and the other thing is like, they are distinct from notifications. These aren't like your notification box. This is my DMs, like my message box was just like flooded with messages. So I'm going through those and I'm seeing all these messages from people being like, hey, have you seen this video? Hey, your ex is saying this. Hey, boop, 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 boop. I'm like, what video? I go, and what I'm expecting to see a video of what I did to the room, which there was. Or maybe some screenshots of me telling them to kill themselves, which there also was. What I wasn't expecting was for them to use what I did to the room and use that I told them to kill themselves as a basis to make all these other claims that I know that they know aren't true. So here's the first thing, and quite honestly, like the biggest thing that offended me about what they said, because yes, I trashed the room. Yes, I told them to kill themselves. Both of those things were wrong. They told people that I was misallocating the funds that people were donating to me. And they said that I wasn't using it to buy a car and that I was just getting people to donate money to me so that I could use it to run up a DoorDash bill or a Uber Eats bill. And I was ordering that all the time. And I took particular issue with that because number one, I love to smoke. And at this time, I was foregoing doing that so that I could save more money for this car, which anyone that knows me would know that I was really sacrificing for that because I love to smoke. So for me to stop smoking, but then reallocate that money to another place of like ordering DoorDash just wouldn't make any sense, number one. The reason it doesn't make any sense to me is because everybody knows how expensive DoorDash and Uber Eats is. So if I was ordering it with the frequency that they said I was ordering it with, I would not have been able to afford to, one, order the Uber that I needed to leave the apartment, to go to the hotel room that I ordered to stay in for 2 days, then to get the plane ticket to Chicago. I would not have been able to afford any of that and then still have, I think, thousands of dollars left over in donations that I had gotten that I was going to use for a car. And so that created this narrative that I was like this pro-Palestine, anti-government, socialist, communist creator, grifter who was lying to people and stealing people's money. And there already is a pre-established like stereotype of people seeing mutual aid as just broke bums asking for change. Like, a lot of people online see crowdfunding as just like broke, lazy people asking for money. And so me coming into the space and then having an ex be like, look, they just spent all this money on DoorDash and Uber Eats and they were misallocating your donations, even though I wasn't doing that, it makes it seem like I'm a grifter, and it adds on to this pre-existing narrative that people have about pro-Palestine creators, just pro-Palestine people in general, being liars and thieves. And so what happened from this point is the reason I was getting so many messages from basically everybody wasn't just because my ex posted the videos and the videos got traction, because that's not exactly how TikTok videos work. There has to be something good or engaging about the video for people to engage with it. And the way the video was shot and made was terrible, because if you've never made a video before, you're going to be terrible at it. The reason why the video got so much traction is because my ex had gone through my mutuals or my friends list and had tagged every single person that I was mutuals with. So every single person that followed me, that I followed back, that I was like friends with online, had seen the video. And this is where things get messy, because then it becomes this kind of weird political moment, because everybody wants to have like this pedestal to stand on to be like, well, if someone's looking low, I can look better. So there were a whole bunch of people that were my mutuals in the comments of the video that my ex made talking about, I could never have believed that your mother would do something like this. This is terrible. We all have to stand behind, John, your mother's ex at this time of need. It was a whole bunch of comments like that from people who were my mutuals and didn't come to talk to me at all about anything. And the whole thing for me is like, I could understand, like, when I see accusations of abuse from celebrities, I believe the person who's the victim. I believe the person that's making the accusation by default. And so in this situation, I wasn't offended by the fact that people were believing my ex by default because they said that I was doing these abusive things, which I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with the fact that I did something abusive, because I would argue that destroying a room and telling someone to kill themselves on the way out it's certainly not nice. The thing is that, number one, I don't think doing something abusive makes you an abusive person, just like doing something bad doesn't make you a bad person, because good people do bad things. And so if I just agree that what I did was abusive by telling them to kill themselves and by trashing that room, if I agree to that, I don't think that that makes me an abusive person. And what was happening is, number one, my ex was fueling the fire of these lies that I was misallocating donations, which I wasn't doing. And then people were using what was in the video as evidence that I was an abusive person, and that my whole TikTok account was just a facade, and that I was pretending to care about these issues that I didn't actually care about, because underneath it all, I was really this evil person that was just ready to snap at any point. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what it was being turned into. That was the narrative that was being run. And so that felt all unfair. And obviously, there's an opinion to be had that, like, well, this is what you ask for when you decide to trash someone's room and tell them to kill themselves, someone that offered you a room to stay in. I think when you know a little bit more about the situation, it makes it seem a little bit more complicated. And I think I'd made a TikTok video at the time trying to explain that, but just like in the heat of it, I was very emotional. And so it came off very rude and mean and like aggressive, because I was. But I was trying to get across a point of just like, I'm not saying I'm the good guy in this. I'm not saying I didn't do bad things. I'm saying that I don't believe I'm a bad person, one. And I think the situation is far more complicated than people are portraying it as, and it's far too complicated for fucking strangers to give their 2 cents on. Anyway, and so from this point, people started sending me death threats, because the narrative there, or like the reasoning there, was I told my ex to kill themselves. So people felt like they had a reason to tell me to kill myself. They were doing something, they were getting justice on behalf of someone else. They saw my ex as being wronged. They saw my ex as a victim of abuse. And so they were getting back at an abuser. So I was getting hundreds of messages every day telling me to kill myself, which isn't great. And something I realized is, like, you see the same negative message over and over again, and it's not about the message, it's about the intent, because girl, when you tell someone to kill themselves, it's not like it's not like a binding command. It's not like a spell that you put them under where they have to do it. It's the intent behind it. It's you saying that you wish they didn't exist. It's you wish that they felt so bad that they would end their own lives. That's what you're saying, and that's why it hurts. It's something that you can only really say to someone that you have a personal relationship with, because it's not about what you're saying, it's about what you mean behind it. But then you contrast it against, I guess it's quantity over quality, because if enough strangers who you have no personal relationship with tell you to kill yourself, it will eventually start to get to you. And then another thing I looked at is I was just losing hundreds of followers by like the hour on TikTok, and there were videos coming out from my mutuals, like vague, I guess you could call them subtweeting, I guess, but it was like vague videos not really naming me, but coming out saying stuff like, we really need to do something about this ongoing issue of people in our community going under the radar, not being exposed properly for their accusations of abuse, like stuff like that. And so there was a lot of that going on, a lot of grandstanding, a lot of just, it was awful. It was awful. It was an awful time, very traumatic. And so I stopped. I can't remember if I deactivated. I think I deleted that account. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I deleted that account. And from there, I considered that a cancellation because people basically, you can't be canceled by people who don't know you and people who don't support you, right? So like in a lot of cases where people are canceled, the reason why it doesn't really happen or doesn't really work is because the people who got mad or offended were people who never supported them in the first place, all right? And people who never supported you or were never coming to your shows, were never watching your videos, can't say we're boycotting your videos. You were doing that before, mama, and it didn't matter. So now it still doesn't matter. What happened in my case though is it was literally people who were mutuals with me coming out, making comments saying that they were turning on me, making videos saying that they were turning on me. And the biggest thing about that is that that sets the tone, and people are going to misconstrue things on the internet anyway, but especially when you have a bunch of creators who also have platforms, most of them bigger platforms than me, who are coming out saying their opinions on this, that is going to tell their followers at the very least how to feel. And so after looking at all that and all the death threats I was getting or messages to kill myself I was getting and all the followers I was losing, I was just like, well, clearly I can't do this anymore. But the basics is that I got canceled. And so after that, I took like a 6-month break from like anything online. I didn't have TikTok on my phone. I was not doing social media really. From there, I kind of just, I was scared to do content again. I didn't think I could do it. It's a weird thing being canceled because even when, like, I knew I was a very small creator. I knew I didn't have a big platform. I knew people didn't know who I was. And even then, the overwhelming negative response from so many people, it makes it feel like everybody knows who you are and everybody hates you, which is a little bit narcissistic. And someone had to check that in me of just like, to feel like everybody hates you is to feel like everybody knows who you are. And that's not true. And so at a certain point, I just kind of had to get over the fear of that and start making videos again. And I couldn't think of anything to really do that would feel authentic because I knew in my mind I can't go back into that specific space. The type of content that I was making about educating people on the history of things and raising money for people, highly dependent on people liking me and trusting me with their funds. And with the narrative that I was stealing money and misallocating people's donations, I just didn't feel comfortable going back in that space to face whatever accusations may come up if I started asking people for money again for any reason. Oh, and also, I can't believe I forgot this. I was, like I said, I was raising money for people. I didn't just do people in Palestine. I did a bunch of different causes. I was raising money for this black girl. I forget exactly what. I think she was having similar issues to me where she had issues with her parents and she needed to move out. I was raising money for her. Once people started canceling me, people started sending her death threats. People started sending her messages telling her to kill herself. Someone who I was raising money for. They started calling her a thief and a grifter and stuff like that. This random person that I didn't even know that well, that I was just raising money for. So getting canceled is awful. And also the people behind it have no real interest in justice. And what they want to see is you be destroyed, which I think in some cases can be justice in the way that like, some people probably need the electric chair for at least a few seconds, but to just like scorched earth every single time with everybody for basically whatever. I'm not going to give like a whole thing about how I'm against cancel culture because I simultaneously think I am a victim of being canceled, but also I don't believe in cancel culture. Anyway, I don't remember what I was talking about. I started making videos again and I tried to think about something that I could do that wasn't politics. And the only other thing that I knew a bunch of about that wasn't Palestine and politics and current events and history was Drag Race. So I started making videos about Drag Race. And if you're wondering about why I give like social commentary in the middle of a Drag Race review where I'm like, I don't like her hair, this dress is ugly, and also can I talk to you about race relations in America? If you're wondering why I do that, it's because I come from a place of doing that. So it's just like, that's the basis of my personality. And so yeah, that's basically like where I come from in a nutshell and the history behind your mother and why I've centralized my platform more around YouTube and Patreon and not TikTok. It's not 100% a choice that I made independently, and more a choice that was made for me that has kind of over time, luckily, turned into something that has been very good for me and that I appreciate ridiculously. I have would never have been able to guess that I would have been able to build a platform around reviewing shows. I never could have guessed that. I never could have anticipated the kind of support that I get from you guys and how nice you guys are, especially for someone who's known for being hateful and like being mean to people, to have my audience be full of like super nice people that like to say nice things is really, 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 really funny. To me, sometimes I like to think about it of like, I think a lot of my audience is like really nice people who have like a secret dark side that like to see someone say all of the mean things that they don't want to say, which is fun. It's really fun, but it never ceases to shock me when I go into my comment section and it's not full of a bunch of people telling me to kill myself.